Hello and welcome. I need to tell you about something that happened 48 hours ago, and I need you to understand it completely, because what I am about to tell you is not speculation. This is documented observation from multiple independent facilities, and it concerns an object that should not exist in the first place. Let me be very clear about this. 48 hours before its closest approach to our Sun, the interstellar object designated 3I Atlas did something that has every major observatory on 3 continents operating on emergency protocols right now. My name is not important. What matters is that I have spent 42 years working in observational astronomy, and in those 4 decades, I have never seen the scientific community respond to anything like this. Not comets breaking apart, not asteroids on collision courses, not gamma-ray bursts, nothing. And I need to tell you what happened because the mainstream coverage you are seeing right now is not telling you the complete picture. There are details being held back. There are observations that have not been released to the public, and there are questions that people at very high levels do not want to answer. Let me start with what we know for certain. 3I Atlas is the third confirmed interstellar object to pass through our solar system. It arrived from outside moving too fast to be gravitationally bound to our Sun. It is traveling at approximately 47 km/s. That speed tells us it came from somewhere else, from another star system, and it is merely passing through ours on its way to somewhere unknown. We detected it 14 months ago when it was still beyond Jupiter's orbit. Since that initial detection, it has been under continuous observation by facilities including the Gemini Observatory, the Keck telescopes, NASA's Deep Space Network, and the European Space Agency's tracking stations. For 14 months, it behaved exactly as expected. It followed a predictable hyperbolic trajectory. Its brightness fluctuated in patterns consistent with rotation. Spectroscopic analysis showed surface composition similar to other interstellar objects we have studied. Everything was normal. Everything was explainable. And then, 48 hours before perihelion, everything changed. Let me tell you exactly what happened because the timeline matters here. The timeline matters enormously. At 0317 hours UTC, 3 separate observatories recorded the same event simultaneously. The object's brightness increased by a factor of 12 in less than 90 seconds. Not gradually, not over hours or days. In 90 seconds, an object traveling through space became 12 times brighter than it had been for the previous 14 months. Now, you might think this is not unusual. You might think comets brighten as they approach the Sun, and you would be correct. Comets do brighten, but this was not cometary outgassing. This was not ice sublimating into jets of vapor. This was something else entirely, and I can prove that to you with 3 pieces of evidence that were documented independently. First, the spectroscopic signature did not change. When comets outgas, they produce characteristic emission lines from water vapor, carbon dioxide, and organic compounds. Those lines appear in the spectrum like fingerprints, unmistakable and impossible to miss. The spectrum from 3I Atlas showed no such lines, none. The object got brighter, but its chemical signature remained identical. That should not happen. That cannot happen if this is outgassing. Second, the brightness increase was uniform across the entire visible surface. Cometary jets are directional. They erupt from specific locations, typically from the sunlit side where ice is sublimating. They create asymmetric patterns. They produce comas and tails that point away from the Sun. 3I Atlas showed none of this. The entire object brightened uniformly and simultaneously as if someone had adjusted a dimmer switch, as if the entire surface became active at once. Third, and this is what has people genuinely concerned, the brightness increase occurred in discrete steps, not a smooth curve, not a gradual transition. The Gemini Observatory recorded the event with a temporal resolution of 3 seconds per data point. Their measurements show the brightness jumping in 5 distinct steps over that 90-second period. 12% increase, 27% increase, 54% increase, and so on until reaching 12 times the baseline luminosity. Those are not natural transitions. Natural processes do not operate in discrete steps like that. I want you to think about what that means. I want you to consider the implications of a surface brightening uniformly and simultaneously in discrete steps with no change in chemical composition, because the people analyzing this data have already drawn their conclusions, and those conclusions are not being shared publicly. Now, let me tell you about the second event, because what I have described so far is only the beginning of this situation. 6 hours after the initial brightness increase, at 0941 UTC, tracking stations detected something else. The object's trajectory changed, not significantly. We are talking about a deviation of 0.03 deg over the span of several hours. 3I Atlas altered its path by an amount so small that it would have been dismissed as measurement error under normal circumstances. But these are not normal circumstances, and that tiny deviation has massive implications. Here is why. An object traveling at 47 km/s has enormous momentum. To change its trajectory even by a fraction of a degree requires force. Significant force. Calculating the energy required to produce that deviation, given the object's estimated mass and velocity, yields a number that exceeds anything a natural outgassing event could produce by several orders of magnitude. We are talking about thrust equivalent to hundreds of kilograms of material being ejected at high velocity over a sustained period. And remember, the spectroscopic data shows no evidence of any material being ejected at all. The trajectory change was asymmetric. It occurred perpendicular to the object's direction of travel and perpendicular to the sun's gravitational pull. That geometry is important. If this were outgassing from solar heating, the force would point away from the sun. If this were tidal effects or gravitational interactions, the deviation would align with known gravitational gradients. This did neither. The trajectory change occurred in a direction that cannot be explained by any natural mechanism currently understood. And there is more. The deviation was not random. The new trajectory, when projected forward, shows the object will pass 0.01 astronomical units closer to Earth than the original path predicted. That is approximately 1.5 million kilometers closer. Not enough to pose any danger, not enough to cause panic, but enough to be noticed, enough to be measured, enough to be questioned. Let me tell you what is not being reported in the mainstream coverage. Let me tell you about the third event, because this is where the situation becomes genuinely alarming. 18 hours after the trajectory change, at 0357 UTC yesterday morning, multiple facilities detected electromagnetic emissions from the object. Not reflected sunlight, not thermal radiation, active electromagnetic transmission in the microwave frequency range. The detection occurred simultaneously at 3 locations. NASA's Deep Space Network facility in Goldstone, California, recorded it. The European Space Agency's tracking station in Malargüe, Argentina, recorded it. The Australian facility at Parkes recorded it. 3 different continents, 3 different instruments, 3 different teams, identical results. The probability of equipment malfunction occurring simultaneously at 3 independent facilities is effectively 0. This is real. This is happening. The signal characteristics are unlike anything natural. The frequency is 1.42 GHz, which happens to fall within the protected radio astronomy band. That band is protected precisely because it is the frequency at which neutral hydrogen emits radiation, making it one of the most important frequencies for astronomical observation. It is also, not coincidentally, one of the frequencies that SETI researchers have monitored for decades, because any technological civilization developing radio astronomy would likely discover this frequency as well. The emission is modulated, not random static, not thermal noise. The signal strength varies in a pattern that repeats every 6.4 seconds. That periodicity matches the object's rotation rate exactly. The signal is polarized, showing a consistent electromagnetic orientation, and the bandwidth is narrow, far narrower than any natural emission process would produce. These characteristics taken together indicate artificial origin. They indicate technology. I have spoken with colleagues who have analyzed this data. I have reviewed the preliminary reports that are circulating within the scientific community, and I can tell you that there is no natural explanation for these observations that survives serious scrutiny. Every attempt to construct a conventional explanation fails when confronted with the complete data set. The brightness increase without outgassing, the trajectory change without ejected material, the electromagnetic emissions with technological signatures. Each piece of evidence individually might be explainable through creative interpretation. Together, they paint a picture that is undeniable. Now, you might be wondering why this is not headline news on every major outlet. You might be asking why governments are not making official statements. You might be questioning why the public response has been so muted. Let me tell you what I know about that, because this is where the situation becomes more complex and, frankly, more disturbing. Within 12 hours of the electromagnetic detection, access protocols at major observatories changed. Researchers who had been monitoring 3I Atlas found their observation time requests denied. Graduate students working on related projects had their data access restricted. Colleagues I have known for decades suddenly stopped responding to inquiries about their findings. This is not normal. This is not how the scientific community operates. When significant discoveries are made, there is excitement, there is collaboration, there is open discussion. Instead, there is silence. I made inquiries. I reached out through professional channels to people I trust, and what I learned is that certain institutions received directives, not requests, directives from government agencies whose names I will not mention because I value my continued access to observational facilities. Those directives essentially instructed researchers to refrain from public discussion of certain aspects of the 3I Atlas observations pending official review. The justification given was preventing public panic and ensuring accurate information dissemination. The reality is information control. There are classified briefings happening right now. I know this because people who attended them mentioned they occurred, even though they cannot discuss the content. The attendance lists for these briefings included representatives from NASA, ESA, the Department of Defense, and intelligence agencies from multiple countries. That level of governmental involvement in what should be purely scientific observation is unprecedented. It indicates they know something, it indicates they are concerned about something, and it indicates they have decided the public should not know everything they know. Let me be clear about something. I am not suggesting conspiracy. I am not claiming cover-up. What I am telling you is that there is information being held back for reasons that have not been explained, and that lack of explanation is itself informative, because the only reasons to restrict information about an astronomical observation are either to prevent panic or to maintain strategic advantage. And given that this object poses no physical threat to Earth, the panic explanation seems unlikely. So what are they worried about? What strategic advantage could possibly exist in controlling information about an interstellar object passing through our solar system, unless, of course, there is more to this object than simple rock and ice traveling between stars, unless the electromagnetic emissions are not just emissions but communication, unless the trajectory change was not natural but deliberate, unless we are not observing a passive piece of interstellar debris but something with agency, something with purpose, something with technology. I want to tell you about something else that happened because the timeline continues and the events continue and the implications continue to accumulate. 24 hours ago, approximately noon UTC, amateur astronomers using backyard telescopes began reporting unusual visual observations of 3I Atlas. These are experienced observers, people who have been watching the sky for decades. They reported that the object's appearance had changed. Instead of the point source it had been, it now showed slight elongation. It appeared to have structure. Professional astronomers initially dismissed these reports. Amateur observations, while valuable, can be subject to atmospheric distortion, equipment limitations, and observational bias. But then the professional facilities confirmed it. High-resolution imaging from the Keck Observatory showed the same elongation. Adaptive optic systems that compensate for atmospheric distortion showed structure where there should be none. The object is not spherical, it is not irregular like a typical asteroid, it has geometric features, it has symmetry. The imaging data is not being publicly released, but I have seen preliminary analysis and I can tell you what it shows. The object appears to have a central core approximately 400 meters in diameter with extensions projecting from opposite sides. The extensions are symmetrical, they are oriented perpendicular to the object's rotation axis and their length is changing. 12 hours ago, they measured approximately 150 meters each. 6 hours ago, they measured 200 meters. They are growing. They are deploying. They are unfurling like solar panels on a spacecraft. Think about that. Think about what it means for an object to alter its physical configuration in response to proximity to a star. Think about what biological or geological process could produce symmetrical geometric structures that deploy on approach to perihelion. Think about how every explanation you construct fails when confronted with the totality of the evidence. The brightness change, the trajectory adjustment, the electromagnetic emissions, the structural deployment, these are not independent anomalies. They are coordinated events. They are stages of a process. They are, dare I say it, operational phases. Let me tell you what perihelion means for this object. In 48 hours, 3I Atlas will reach its closest point to the Sun. It will pass within 0.7 astronomical units, well inside Earth's orbit, at the same distance Venus orbits. At that point, solar radiation will be at maximum intensity for this object's trajectory. If those deployed structures are collecting solar energy, and I cannot think of another explanation for their geometry and deployment timing, then in 48 hours they will be receiving maximum energy input. And then what happens? Does the object continue its trajectory out of our solar system back into interstellar space, carrying whatever information it has gathered about our Sun and our planets? Does it transmit that information somewhere? Does something respond? These are not idle questions. These are the questions that intelligence agencies are asking right now. These are the questions that have prompted the classified briefings and the information restrictions and the sudden governmental interest in astronomical observation. I want to tell you about one more piece of this puzzle because there is always one more piece, one more detail that changes the context of everything else. Yesterday evening, a colleague who works with satellite tracking mentioned something in passing, something they probably should not have mentioned. They said that certain satellites with capabilities for imaging and signals intelligence, have been retasked. Those satellites which normally point at Earth monitoring communications and activities here have been retasked to point away from Earth. They are now monitoring 3I Atlas. That retasking represents a significant commitment of resources. Those satellites are expensive to operate. Their observation time is precious. The decision to redirect them away from their primary missions toward an astronomical target indicates that someone somewhere at a very high level of authority decided that monitoring this object is more important than monitoring whatever those satellites normally monitor. That is not a decision made lightly. That is not a decision made without extraordinary justification. So here we are, 48 hours before perihelion, an interstellar object exhibiting behaviors that defy conventional explanation. Electromagnetic emissions with technological signatures, structural deployments suggesting engineered components, governmental interest at the highest levels, information restrictions, classified briefings, retasked surveillance assets, and silence, official silence from institutions that should be celebrating what could be the most significant astronomical discovery in human history. I have been asked why I am telling you this. I have been advised that speaking publicly about these observations could be misinterpreted, could cause unnecessary concern, could damage professional relationships, and perhaps that is true. Perhaps I should wait for official announcements, perhaps I should trust that the appropriate authorities will share information when they deem it appropriate, but I have spent 42 years in this field, and I have learned that silence serves those who benefit from secrecy, not those who deserve truth. The people who are restricting this information will tell you they are preventing panic. They will tell you they need time to verify findings and coordinate responses. They will tell you that premature disclosure would be irresponsible. And there is validity to those arguments, but there is also danger in silence. There is danger in allowing a small group of decision-makers to control what humanity knows about something this significant, because if this object is what the evidence suggests it might be, then its implications belong to all of us, not just to those with security clearances. Let me tell you what is going to happen in the next 48 hours. The object will continue its approach to perihelion. The deployed structures will continue extending. The electromagnetic emissions will likely increase in intensity as solar radiation increases. And somewhere, in facilities whose names we know and facilities whose names we do not, people will be watching. They will be measuring. They will be analyzing. And they will be deciding what to tell us and what to keep secret. I cannot tell you what 3I Atlas is. I cannot give you definitive answers about its origin or its purpose. What I can tell you is what the evidence shows. What I can tell you is that this object is behaving in ways that suggest technology. What I can tell you is that people in positions of authority are treating this as something significant enough to justify extraordinary measures. And what I can tell you is that you deserve to know these things, to draw your own conclusions, to ask your own questions. There will be those who dismiss this as speculation. There will be those who argue that extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, and they are correct. But we have extraordinary evidence. We have multiple independent observations from credible facilities. We have documented measurements that cannot be explained conventionally. We have institutional responses that indicate genuine concern. At what point does skepticism become denial? At what point does caution become censorship? I want you to pay attention to what happens next. I want you to watch the official statements that will inevitably come. I want you to notice what they emphasize and what they omit. I want you to ask yourself why certain information is shared immediately while other information requires weeks or months of review. I want you to think critically about who benefits from your ignorance and who benefits from your knowledge. This is not entertainment. This is not science fiction. This is documented observation of an object currently traveling through our solar system. And what happens in the next 48 hours may well determine how we understand our place in the universe. Because if this object is artificial, if it represents technology from another world, then every assumption we have made about our cosmic isolation is wrong. Every calculation about the probability of intelligent life is wrong. Every philosophical framework that assumes humanity is alone is wrong. And if it is not artificial, if there is some natural explanation that accounts for all of these observations, then we have discovered physics we do not understand. We have discovered processes we did not know existed. We have discovered that the universe is stranger and more complex than we imagined. Either outcome transforms our knowledge. Either outcome demands attention. The people monitoring this situation know something. The trajectory of governmental response, the pattern of information control, the level of resource commitment, all of these indicators point toward knowledge that is not being shared, and I understand the arguments for discretion. I understand the complexity of managing information that could be destabilizing, but I also understand that we cannot make informed decisions. We cannot prepare appropriately. We cannot even ask the right questions if we are kept ignorant of relevant facts. So, I am telling you what I know. I am sharing observations that have been documented. I am describing responses that have occurred, and I am asking you to remain alert to what comes next. Share this information. Discuss it with people who will think critically about it. Watch for updates from astronomical sources. Monitor official statements for inconsistencies, because in 48 hours we will know more. In 48 hours, the object will be at perihelion. And whatever happens then, whatever we observe or do not observe, whatever is disclosed or concealed, will tell us something important about where we are and what we face. I have spent my career studying the cosmos. I have observed supernovae and pulsars and black holes. I have mapped galaxies and measured cosmic distances. I have dedicated my life to understanding the universe beyond our world. And in all that time, I have never encountered anything like this. I have never seen evidence that challenges fundamental assumptions the way these observations challenge them. I have never felt the mixture of excitement and apprehension that comes from knowing we may be witnessing something that changes everything. Let me be clear about my position. I am not claiming definitive knowledge of extraterrestrial technology. I am not asserting that we have been visited by an alien probe. What I am asserting is that the evidence we have gathered about 3I Atlas does not fit conventional explanations. What I am asserting is that people with access to more complete data are behaving as though this situation requires extraordinary attention. What I am asserting is that you deserve to know these things and to draw your own conclusions. The next 48 hours will be significant. Watch for news about 3I Atlas. Watch for changes in the official narrative. Watch for additional observations that either support or contradict what I have told you. And most importantly, watch for what is not said. Watch for the questions that are avoided, the topics that are deflected, the information that remains classified, because sometimes what is hidden tells you more than what is revealed. I will continue monitoring this situation. I will continue seeking information through whatever channels remain available. And I will continue sharing what I learn, because I believe that knowledge about something this significant should not be restricted to those with clearances and connections. We are all inhabitants of this solar system. We all have a stake in understanding what passes through it. We all deserve truth about what we face. 48 hours until perihelion. 48 hours until we learn whether this object is merely the strangest natural phenomenon we have encountered or something far more significant. 48 hours until the trajectory either continues unremarkably into interstellar space or changes again in ways that cannot be explained. 48 hours until we know whether we are alone or whether we have been observing our first confirmed technological artifact from another world. Pay attention, ask questions, demand answers, and prepare yourself for the possibility that in 48 hours everything you thought you knew about our cosmic context may change forever. This is not speculation. This is observation. This is documentation. This is happening right now. And what comes next will define how humanity responds to perhaps the most important question we have ever confronted. Are we alone? Or have we just been contacted in a way we are only beginning to understand? The clock is running, the object is approaching, and the truth, whatever it may be, will reveal itself in time. I only hope that when it does, we are ready to accept it and to act on it wisely. Thank you for listening. Share this widely. The world needs to know.